Do you know that moment when someone tells you your history is a gift, that your ancestors' suffering was actually good for you, and you can't find the words to respond? It's not just insulting, it's the same lie that justifies why 46 of 49 protesters were killed in indigenous regions of Peru in 2022 and 2023. I'll show you exactly how a 500-year-old Spanish lie connects directly to bullets fired in my wife's hometown, with receipts from over 40 academic sources. My wife's from Juliaca, Peru. She is indigenous. I live with her in Ayacucho. Last year in Lima, a Spanish Airbnb owner told us that she should be grateful for colonization, that Spain brought civilization, freed her people from oppression, gave them rights. I froze. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't have the evidence to prove it. Millions believe this. In Peru, people tell my wife she's mejorar la raza, improving her race by being with me. But there's something about these claims that most people get completely backward. The Spanish said they brought civilization to cannibals and savages. Your first instinct might be to argue the Incas weren't cannibals, but that's the wrong approach. The real question is why Spanish reports suddenly started calling everyone cannibals after 1503. Columbus created the word cannibal by conflating Caribbean peoples called caniba with eating human flesh, based more on imagination than observation. But why? Because in 1503, a bull said you could legally enslave one specific group, cannibals. Suddenly, every group that resisted became cannibals in Spanish reports. It wasn't anthropology, it was a business model. For Peru, the Incas explicitly shunned eating human flesh. Archaeological digs found, and I quote, nothing approaching the thousands of victims the Spanish claimed. But here's what the Spanish actually found. Felipe Guamon Poma de Ayala, Quechua nobleman, spent 15 years documenting what he saw. 1,189 pages, 398 hand-drawn illustrations showing Spanish officials beating indigenous women, workers driven to mines, and priests demanding sexual favors. The Incas were sophisticated. They governed 9 million people, built 5,000 kilometers of road networks that some Spanish chroniclers admitted were finer than ancient Rome. They created earthquake-proof architecture without mortar. The Andean peoples had 3 fundamental principles. Amasua, don't steal. Amalula, don't lie. And Amakrila, don't be lazy. The Spanish violated all 3. They stole 24 tons of gold from Atahualpa alone. They lied about providing protection, and they forced indigenous people into brutal labor while extracting wealth. The Spanish didn't bring civilization, they destroyed it. The Spanish destroyed the most sophisticated civilization in South America. They turned those exact regions into extraction zones. 500 years later, those same regions are still being targeted. That's not coincidence, that's continuity. But maybe you're thinking, the Incas were not angels, they had forced labor too. Doesn't that make the Spanish liberation partially true? This is where it gets dark. November 1532, Pizarro's trap closes. Atahualpa is captured. He offers history's richest ransom. He would fill a room 24 feet long, 18 feet wide, and 8 feet high with gold. He delivers 24 tons of gold and silver. The Spanish take it, and then they put him on trial for treason against Spain, a country he had never been to. July 26, 1533, they execute him. But that was just the beginning. The Spanish took the Inca mita, rotational community labor where the state fed you, and they turned it into this. Potosi, a Spanish friar called it a mouth of hell. 13,500 men forced annually to work at altitude, underground, 50-degree heat, 300-pound loads. Conservative scholars estimate over 1 million dead at Potosi alone. Mercury poisoning killed a third of workers. Highland provinces lost 60% of their population. When Tupac Amaru II rebelled against this system in 1780, Spain killed up to 100,000 indigenous people. But indigenous people never stopped resisting. Peru went from 9 million people to 600,000 in 1 century. 90% dead. That's not liberation, that's the worst demographic disaster in human history. The Spanish love citing their protective laws, like the new laws of 1542. But here's what they don't tell you. When Viceroy Blasco Núñez Vela arrived to enforce them, the Spanish colonists beheaded him. The king revoked the laws. But let's say you believe Spain tried. When did indigenous Peruvians actually receive rights? Peru gained independence in 1821. Forced labor ended 148 years later. Quechua recognized as an official language 154 years after independence. And the right to be consulted about mining on their land 190 years after independence. Today, an indigenous Peruvian needs 80% more job applications for the same interview. Life expectancy is 20 years lower. December 2022, Pedro Castillo, Peru's first rural provincial president, gets removed from office. Protests erupt. January 9th, 2023, Juliaca, my wife's hometown, 18 people are killed in 1 day. In total, 49 people end up dead, 39 shot. The police confiscated 0 firearms from protesters. Human Rights Watch found no protester with guns in 37 hours of footage. The new President Boluarte's response: Puno is not Peru. So why do Spanish people and Peruvian elites still believe these lies? Spanish intellectuals created the white legend, claiming their colonization was uniquely benevolent. Spain was stigmatized in Europe for mixing with Moors and Jews. When they mixed with indigenous peoples, it confirmed European prejudices about Spanish racial impurity. So they created Mestizaje. We're all mixed, as defense and hierarchy simultaneously. And Spain still defends this today. In 2019, Mexico's president asked Spain to apologize for colonial abuses. Spain's response: the arrival of Spaniards cannot be judged in the light of contemporary considerations. In other words, genocide can't be judged by today's moral standards. That's Spain's official position. Spain still celebrates October the 12th as Day of Hispanidad, celebrating the beginning of colonization. But let's be clear about how this mixing actually happened. Most of this mixing in the first century of colonization happened through rape. Indigenous women had no choice. Spanish men claimed right of conquest over women's bodies, just like they claimed the land. Today they package this violence as we're all beautifully mixed. They tell my wife she is improving her race, as if the original mixing was voluntary, as if it wasn't trauma passed down through generations. They turned evidence of rape into a national identity, then told the descendants to be grateful. They're rebranding sexual violence as progress, just like they rebranded extraction as development and genocide as civilization. Scholar Marisol de la Cadena documented how it works. You improve your race by accumulating money, going to expensive university, moving neighborhoods, forgetting where you come from. Indigenous people must commit de-Indianization to escape discrimination. And here's how the lie reproduces itself. A Colombian friend went to a Catholic school founded in 1604. 4 centuries later, they're still teaching that Columbus brought civilization. No mention of genocide, no mention of slavery, no mention of rape. The schools themselves are colonial infrastructure, still functioning, still lying. That's not education, that's indoctrination that's been running for 400 years. Peruvian sociologist Aníbal Quijano called this coloniality, colonial structures surviving after colonialism ends. Colonial power doesn't die, it survives, it adapts. A 2021 economic history study proved former Mita districts still have worse outcomes 400 years later. They are the poorest regions today. The same regions where protesters died in 2022, where 75% of victims in Peru's 1980 to 2000 conflict were Quechua speakers. The extraction never stopped. It just changed management. In 2024, archaeologists scanned 179,000 square kilometers of the Andes using satellite AI. 95% of grid cells show no archaeological traces. Where indigenous communities once thrived, now just emptiness. That emptiness is colonial disruption visible from space. The Spanish brought 3 things to Peru: death for 90% of the population, extraction that continues today, and lies about both. And these lies aren't unique to Peru. The same schools, the same improvement through rape rebranded as mixing, the same violence against those who resist are taught in Bogotá, Mexico City, and Santiago. 500 years of resistance, from Atahualpa to Tupac Amaru to the protesters in 2023. The same fight, the same regions, the same refusal to accept a lie. Share this with anyone who thinks colonization was civilizing. The sources are below. And if you want more evidence-based takedowns of historical propaganda, subscribe. History versus hype. Evidence beats mythology every single time.